What if every time you explained yourself to someone who didn't ask, you were quietly proving that you don't trust yourself? Think about it. How often do you rehearse conversations in your head, not because you're unsure of your decision, but because you're afraid of how it will look? You explain your choices. You justify your silence. You soften your ambition so it doesn't make others uncomfortable. And slowly, without realizing it, you start living a life that needs permission. Not your life, a version of it that feels acceptable. Here's the truth most people avoid. The more you explain your life, the less power you have over it, because explanation is not clarity, it's negotiation. And every time you negotiate your decisions with people who are not living your consequences, you give away a piece of your authority. We live in a world that rewards exposure. Post everything, share everything, explain everything. Your goals, your struggles, your next move. But what no one tells you is this: the more you expose your path, the weaker your focus becomes. Because attention is not free. Every time you speak, you spend it. And most people are bankrupt without realizing it. They talk more than they build. They explain more than they execute. They seek approval instead of progress. And then they wonder why nothing changes. 2,000 years ago, long before social media, the Stoics saw this trap clearly. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, wrote something that cuts through all of this noise. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not explain, not announce, not justify. Be. That is the difference. Lesson 1. Your life is not a performance. There's something deeply uncomfortable about silence. That moment when you're working on something important, but no one knows. No validation, no recognition, no applause. Just you and the work. Most people can't handle that, so they talk, they announce their plans, they share their goals, they look for reactions, because it feels like progress. But it's not. It's a substitute, a psychological shortcut, and your brain falls for it every time. Here's what happens when you share too early. You get a small hit of satisfaction, a little burst of recognition, and your brain mistakes it for achievement. The work hasn't been done, but the reward has already been felt, so the hunger disappears, drive fades, momentum dies. That's why most people start strong and finish nothing, because they leaked their energy into words, instead of protecting it for action. The Stoics understood something most people still don't. Real growth is quiet. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need an audience. Because the moment you turn your life into a performance, you stop living it. You start acting. And actors don't grow. They repeat. So ask yourself this: are you building something, or are you talking about building something? Because those are two completely different paths. One leads to results, the other leads to frustration. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. It's focus without distraction, progress without pressure, growth without interference, and most importantly, it's yours. Lesson 2. Words can kill your momentum. Let's go deeper. Have you ever told someone about a goal and immediately felt less motivated to pursue it? That's not coincidence. That's psychology. Every time you speak your plans out loud, your brain releases a small reward. It feels like progress. It feels like movement. But it's not real. It's artificial. You traded effort for recognition, and recognition feels good, but it builds nothing. This is why people stay stuck. They live in the illusion of progress. They talk about starting. They talk about improving. They talk about changing. But they never build enough pressure to actually do it, because pressure requires silence. Focus requires silence. Execution requires silence. The most dangerous habit you can have is this: talking instead of doing. Words feel powerful, but when used too early, they weaken you. They drain the energy meant for action, They satisfy the mind before the work is complete. Think about it like this. Your ambition is fuel. Every time you talk about your plans, you leak that fuel. A little at first, then more, until one day there's nothing left to drive you forward. And then you say, "I lost motivation." No, you gave it away. The most powerful people understand this. They don't announce, they don't explain. They build, quietly, relentlessly, consistently. And when the results appear, they don't need to say anything, because results speak in a language that requires no explanation. So the next time you feel the urge to share your next move, pause. Ask yourself one question: am I doing this for progress or for approval? If it's approval, stay silent. Go back to work. Lesson 3. Attention is your most valuable asset. Most people think time is their most valuable resource. It's not. Attention is. Because where your attention goes, your life follows. Right now, your attention goes, your life follows. Right now, your attention is under attack. Notifications, messages, conversations, people asking about your life, your plans, your next step. And every time you engage without intention, you lose something. Not just time, clarity. Because attention is like a spotlight. Where you place it determines what grows. If you give it to distractions, your life becomes scattered. If you give it to noise, your mind becomes noisy. If you give it to people who don't add value, your energy disappears. Most people don't realize this. They speak freely. They share everything. They open every door. And then they wonder why they feel drained. It's because attention is a currency, and they're spending it without awareness. Every conversation costs you something. Every explanation takes energy. Every unnecessary interaction pulls you away from your path. So the Stoics practiced something radical. They became selective. Selective with their words. Selective with their time. Selective with their attention. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." The less you need from others, the more power you have. When you stop needing validation, you stop wasting attention. And when you stop wasting attention, you start building momentum. This is where your life changes, not in big dramatic moments, but in small daily decisions, what you focus on, what you ignore, what you protect, because whatever you protect grows, and whatever you neglect disappears. So protect your attention, guard it like it matters, because it does, more than you think. There is a version of you that doesn't need to explain anything, that doesn't seek approval, that doesn't waste energy on noise. That version moves differently, calmer, sharper, more focused. And once you step into that version, you'll realize something powerful. You were never lacking discipline, you were just leaking it. But this is only the beginning, because once you stop explaining your life, once you reclaim your attention, once you start moving in silence, you will face something far more difficult than noise. People, their opinions, their expectations, their resistance to your growth. And how you handle that will determine everything. The moment you stop explaining your life, something strange begins to happen. People notice. Not always directly, not always openly, but they feel it, because you're no longer predictable. You're no longer easy to read, easy to influence, easy to control, and that makes people uncomfortable. Most people don't actually want you to grow, not consciously, but psychologically they resist it, because your growth disrupts their comfort. Think about it. The old version of you was easy to understand, easy to label, easy to keep in a box. But the moment you change, the moment you become quieter, sharper, more focused, you break that pattern. And people don't know what to do with that, so they start asking questions. Why are you acting different? What are you working on? Why don't you talk as much anymore? It sounds like curiosity, but often it's resistance. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you remove access, and most people are used to having access to your thoughts, to your plans, to your emotions. But here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world, and the moment you realize that, you take back control of your life. Lesson 4. Not everyone deserves your truth. Your life is not a public space. It's not an open book. It's a private structure, and like any structure, it needs boundaries. But most people were never taught this. They were taught to share everything, to be open with everyone, to explain themselves constantly, as if transparency equals honesty. It doesn't. Oversharing is not honesty. It's exposure, and exposure without discernment leads to vulnerability. Every time you share your goals with the wrong person, you invite doubt, comparison, unnecessary opinions, and those things don't build you, they weaken you. Not everyone listens to support you. Some listen to compare. Some listen to judge. Some listen to shedge. Some listen to feel better about themselves. And if you're not careful, you will give your energy to people who were never meant to receive it. This is why strong people become selective. They don't shut the world out. They filter it. They understand something most people ignore. Access is earned, not given freely. Your thoughts, your plans, your struggles, these are not things to distribute casually. They are things to protect, because the more people you let into your inner world, the more influence they have over it. And influence is dangerous when it comes from the wrong source. So learn to ask yourself, does this person deserve access to this part of my life? If the answer is unclear, stay silent. Silence protects clarity, and clarity protects direction. Lesson 5. People want the old version of you. Here's something most people won't say out loud. People prefer the version of you they understand, not the version of you you're becoming, because the old you is predictable, comfortable, familiar. But growth breaks familiarity, and when familiarity breaks, people feel unstable, so they try to pull you back, not aggressively, not intentionally, but subtly, through questions, through doubt, through comments disguised as concern. Are you sure about that? That doesn't sound like you. Why are you changing? And if you're not grounded, you'll start questioning yourself. This is where most people fail. Not because they lack discipline, but because they lack certainty. They look outward instead of inward. And the moment you look outward for approval, you lose your direction. Because other people don't live your consequences. They don't carry your vision. They don't feel your potential. So why would they understand your path? They can't, and they don't need to. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept. You will not be understood by everyone. And that's not a problem, it's a requirement. Because if everyone understands your path, you're probably not doing anything different. Growth creates distance. Distance creates misunderstanding, and misunderstanding creates pressure. But pressure is not your enemy. It's your test. Can you continue without being understood? Can you move forward without being validated? Can you trust yourself when no one else does? That's where real power is built. Because the moment you stop needing people to understand you, you become free. Lesson 6. Boundaries create power. There's a word most people misunderstand. Boundaries. They think boundaries are rude, cold, unnecessary, selfish. But in reality, boundaries are structure. Without structure, nothing holds. If you say yes to everything, you stand for nothing. If you explain everything, you weaken everything. If you open every door, you lose control of your space. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting what matters. Your time, your energy, your focus. These are limited resources. And once they're gone, you don't get them back. So every time you say yes to something that doesn't align, you say no to something that does. This is why powerful people are selective, not because they're arrogant, but because they're intentional. They don't attend everything. They don't answer everything. They don't explain everything. They choose carefully. And that choice creates control. Because control is not about dominating others, it's about directing yourself. And you cannot direct yourself if your energy is scattered across everything. So start small. Say no when it matters. Stay silent when it's unnecessary. Walk away when it drains you. These are not big actions, but they build something powerful, self-respect. And once you respect yourself, the world adjusts accordingly. Because people don't treat you based on what you say. They treat you based on what you allow. And boundaries define what you allow. So define them, protect them, stand by them. Because the life you want cannot exist without them. But even with boundaries, even with silence, even with discipline, there's still one challenge left, the hardest one, facing yourself. Because once the noise fades, once the opinions lose their power, once the distractions disappear, you are left with one thing, your mind. And what you find there will either build you or break you. That's where the final transformation begins. When the noise disappears, when the opinions stop mattering, when you finally stop explaining your life, you're left with something most people spend their entire lives avoiding: yourself. No distractions, no validation, no external voice telling you who you are. Just you and your mind. And this is where the real battle begins. Because the hardest person to face is not the world. It's the version of you that still hesitates, still doubts, still looks for permission. Most people think their problem is lack of discipline. It's not. Their problem is lack of self-trust. They don't trust their decisions. They don't trust their direction. They don't trust themselves to follow through, so they compensate, they over-explain. They oversplain, they overshare, they overseek validation. Because if someone else agrees with them, it feels safer. But safety is not strength, and dependence is not confidence. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that true power does not come from controlling the world. It comes from controlling the world. It comes from controlling yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Not sometimes, not when it's easy, always. That is your responsibility and your opportunity." Lesson 7. Self-ascertainability builds unbreakable confidence. There is one habit that separates strong people from everyone else. They hold themselves accountable, not publicly, not for attention, privately, relentlessly. Most people avoid this because accountability removes excuses. It forces you to admit you didn't follow through. You wasted time. You chose comfort over growth. And that truth is uncomfortable, but discomfort over growth. And that truth is uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the problem. Avoiding it is. Because every time you avoid accountability, you weaken your self-trust. And once self-trust is weak, everything else collapses. Confidence disappears. Discipline fades. Direction becomes unclear. But when you face yourself honestly, everything changes. You stop lying to yourself. You stop negotiating with your potential. You stop pretending you're doing the work. And you start doing it. This is why the Stoics practiced daily reflection, not occasionally, daily. Every night they asked, "What did I do right? Where did I fall short? What will I do better tomorrow?" Simple questions, but powerful, because they create awareness. And awareness creates change. You don't need motivation, you need clarity. Clarity about who you are, clarity about what you're doing, clarity about what you're doing, clarity about where you're going, And that clarity only comes when you stop avoiding yourself. So start today. 5 minutes, no phone, no distractions, just you and the truth. Because the person who can face themselves honestly becomes impossible to break. Lesson 8. Hardness creates freedom. There is a lie most people believe. That comfort leads to happiness. It doesn't. Comfort leads to dependency. And dependency leads to weakness, because the more you rely on comfort, the less you can handle discomfort, and life is not built on comfort. The Stoics trained for this. They practiced discomfort intentionally, cold environments, simple food, difficult conditions, not because they had to, because they wanted to become stronger than circumstance. They understood something powerful. If you can handle discomfort, you become free. Free from fear, free from hesitation, free from needing perfect conditions. But if you depend on comfort, you become fragile, easily disturbed, easily distracted, easily controlled. Comfort creates dependency. Dependency destroys resilience, and resilience is the foundation of freedom. So stop avoiding difficulty. Start choosing it. Do the hard thing when it's inconvenient. Speak the truth when it's uncomfortable. Stay disciplined when it's boring, because every time you choose difficulty, you build strength. And strength compounds until one day you realize something has changed. Things that used to feel hard feel normal. Things that used to scare you don't affect you. Things that used to stop you no longer can. That is transformation. Not sudden, not dramatic. Built quietly, through daily decisions. Final truth: you don't need permission. At the end of all of this, there is one truth that matters more than anything else. You don't need permission, not from your friends, not from your family, not from society, not from anyone. You never did, but you've been conditioned to believe you do, to explain yourself, to justify your path, to wait for approval. And that belief has been holding you back, because while you're waiting, life is moving. Opportunities pass, time disappears, potential fades, and one day you realize you spent your life explaining it instead of living it. Don't let that happen. Stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop asking. Start building. Your life is not something to defend. It's something to create. And creation requires action, not validation. So from this moment forward, move differently, speak less, focus more, build quietly, act consistently. Let people misunderstand you. Let them doubt you. Let them question you. Because none of that matters. What matters is what you do and what you become. Because in the end, the world doesn't remember explanations. It remembers results. So build something worth remembering, and do it without asking for permission. If this message changed how you see yourself, don't ignore that. Take one action today, just one, that moves your life forward, and commit to it quietly. If you're ready to stop living for approval and start living with purpose, subscribe, because this is not motivation. This is discipline. This is awareness. This is transformation. Become the master of your mind. Rebuild, refocus, rise.